Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. A lone cry in Minnesota. A cry in Michigan. Multiplied across the country, this single shout, rolling from ocean to ocean, undeniable to the ear, and a first for people of conscience to declare that genocide is intolerable to the American conscience. It was October 31st that we set to have a ceasefire deadline day, a day that we set that the president would call a permanent ceasefire. And history was written that Mr. Biden would not call that ceasefire, and abandoned Biden emerged. A movement premised on civil rights to end bloodshed once and for all, that civil rights belong to all people, not just Americans. And that multiplied that voice, the launching of Abandon Biden from Wisconsin to Arizona, from Arizona to Georgia, from Georgia to Pennsylvania. Abandon Biden leaders stood strong and confident, united with people of conscience all across this nation. We went against insurmountable odds. The White House trying to stop our conference on December 2nd in Dearborn, in which we vowed that we would actively campaign against this president that we voted for in droves, a man we adored, a man for which we had no problem with his age, for which we respected, a story which has despair and the loss of life of his family. Sympathy was what he received from this community, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, and people of conscience, our allies. And it was the White House that reached out to us through their surrogates, and they asked us, what about democracy? And we told them that we could not, in good conscience, allow the dripping of blood of people, innocent, suffering under a brutal occupation, and now the recipients of bombardment and munitions raining from the sky, helpless, with no voice, and the leaders behind me suffering and toiling in this state to ensure that the inaudible are voiced. They called the president and demanded that he would simply and merely end violence. Not a single additional inch of land was demanded. Just that there would be no more bombardments, that the munitions would end. And there was silence. The White House reached out to us and said we were experiencing a tantrum. But this tantrum became a mountain. The launching of Abandon Biden through the states, the uncommitted campaign in the primary, and then holding hands with people from all backgrounds, within erected tents, courageously speaking out at universities in the encampments. The launches received silence. The primary uncommitted campaign, silence. The encampments, silence. And then came June 27th. The rumble of abandoning, now echoing throughout the country. And we came out, and here we are again, to say that this country should demand that this president drop out because he's not capable morally to lead this country and to ensure that civil rights are promoted, endorsed, and enabled across this planet This nation should be a light, its glimmering cities shining upon the world. And instead, this president promises health care and the forgiveness of debts. And he promises fighting climate change. But then we shed blood across the planet. Unassailable righteousness of our cause is what fires us today. And what we're here to say is to the country that have now seen this president speak, have now seen his capacity, have now witnessed the struggles he endures, that without our votes and what the country has witnessed, this president is going to be defeated. And so the question that the president asked me of what about democracy and saving democracy by losing the votes of Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, and our allies in the swing states that could lead to his defeat, I now ask the president directly, as I did yesterday in the Capitol, Mr. President, save democracy and step down. Step down from this race and make sure that your legacy, the parts of it that stand by civil rights are promoted, and that the ones in which you stood by the bloodshed of a people undeserving would come to a final, periodic end. At the Biden, we are guided by the light of Martin Luther King, a light in which we believe is not the Martin Luther King who many Americans remember, or in his grandiose moral cause sought civil rights and voting rights, but the Martin Luther King who spoke out against the Vietnam War, who saw that injury and maiming of people who are not American deserved a voice in the streets. And we came out in the streets, speaking words and uttering righteousness like ceasefire now and free Palestine. Americans are no different than Palestinians. And now, with a toll of 186,000 of deaths that this government has promoted, the camel's back is broken. The loss of these votes from community members across this country, and now from the abandoning movement that rumbles this nation since the 27th of June, it's undeniable what the president must do according to the standards and principles that he has placed upon the leaders of abandoned Biden. But we have experience having done this since October. We can tell you, and I speak to our fellow Americans, this president is stubborn. He's in denial of his genocide, and he's in denial of his incapacity to lead this nation. Ida Wells instructed us compellingly when she wrote that we should turn light upon wrongs. To right the wrongs of our nation, we shine the light of genocide upon this deep, deep stain that we now suffer from. That's abandoned Biden. And we ask the American people to shine this light. And we ask Nancy Pelosi and Representative Jeffries, we ask Senator Bernie Sanders to join us here to abandon Biden and to now call a new slogan: to drop out now. Drop out now. Drop out now. Drop out now. This president's silence is what perturbs us most. When pundits speak about the things he didn't say and the ways that he said it in that debate. But the launching of Abandon Biden in November, the uncommitted campaign, the erected tents, and now this debate. We ask fellow Americans at the footsteps of justice and under this sky shared by all people of conscience, that we must hold hands like in the camp and make our camp America and tell this president without fear of retribution, without fear of consequence, in the best tradition of our forefathers and foremothers, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, John Lewis, to drop out now. And so make this movement a tantrum indeed, and let civil rights be for all. Our nation can be light upon this planet. And that's the little that we ask as we move towards greater perfection. These leaders here ask each of you to look into your conscience. There are a few weeks left. A party for which many of our leaders have made a home for decades and feel an affinity and a sense of connection. We're here to say we can make this difference in the next 4 weeks and have a different candidate. A candidate who stands for truth, who shines the light of goodness upon their platform for this country. Join us all, our fellow Americans, in this cause that we know you feel affinity. I was tortured and detained for 23 days in Israel, in occupied Palestine. And I can tell you that I felt a second trauma when I came back home to America. The trauma of loneliness, the trauma of my suffering being unknown. And now we see people for which their bones are revealed through their skin, and mothers and uncles displaced. A man who called me as we were launching the campaign, who said, "Hassan, brother Hassan, I just received the news that I just lost 24 members of my family." My fellow Americans, no American should ever hear those words uttered in their life. And when I came back, all it took was my story for people to know that this was oppression and injustice. And now we share everywhere the story of Palestinians, of occupation, the Democratic Party that stands for ending racism, that stands for fighting for climate change, for universal health care, should stand for ending genocide anywhere, everywhere, forever. And without the silence of this president, who's unresponsive. Americans, join me in my trauma and ring the sound, a tantrum across this nation for our president to drop out. A continuation of the first chants that multiplied and rolled across this nation. The chant, "Ceasefire now, ceasefire now, ceasefire now." Thanks.
When you have a chance, could you state your name and speak before you speak so we know?
My name is Samra Lickman, spelled S-A-M-R-A-A, last name L-U-M-A-N. We're here as a diverse group of people, of Americans, to send a message to the White House, to Genocide Joe, that he is a war criminal and he's not welcome in Michigan and he needs to drop out of the race now. He was not welcome now. He's not welcome before the debate. He wasn't in fact welcome since October 2023 when he refused to call for a ceasefire. The rejection of Biden is one that resonates with over 75% of the Americans who have been calling for a ceasefire. It is deplorable that the media and Democrats would paint the drop in support and lackluster polling for Joe Biden on a despicable debate performance. People aren't abandoning Biden because he's old and walks around with a gaping mouth. They don't find him abhorrent because he can't find his way off of a stage. We don't find him disgusting because of the way he eats ice cream. We've been calling for Democrats to abandon Biden since November because he's committing a genocide. And yes, I said it, he is actually committing a genocide. If there's anything that I'm more sick of than the videos that are coming out of Palestine and the horrific atrocities that Israel's committing, it is the fact that people continue to soften the rhetoric behind Joe's active role in these massacres. Joe is not complacent and passively allowing this to happen. He is actively enjoining Bibi in the commission of the genocide by provisioning the arms that are literally being used to ethnically cleanse entire city blocks, by sending the tanks, munitions, artillery, intelligence that is being used to target civilians. And how do we know this? Because the Wall Street Journal and CNN both reported a few months ago that the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, said about 40 to 45% of the 29,000 air-to-ground munitions Israel has used have been unguided, meaning that they kill everyone in their path, and that the U.S. has provided Israel with unguided munitions, including 5,000 Mk-82 bombs, the same exact ones that have leveled Gaza. Biden is knowingly providing these bombs to level all of the rest of Palestine as we speak. So while Trump might say they need to finish the job, Biden is actually ensuring that they do it now. And he knows this. This was our own U.S. Director of National Intelligence that I quoted. In fact, Biden knew this information so well that at one point he delayed the shipment of some of these bombs to Israel, but that delay was only temporary and for political show. And again yesterday, Biden sent another round of 500-pound unguided bombs to Israel. This is on top of the times he has signed over billions in military aid through Congress and the hundreds of millions that he has sent in bypassing Congress. This level of engagement makes Biden just as guilty as Bibi of war crimes. These aren't my standards of guilt. Check out Ethan Crumbley's parents and where they are right now. They were convicted of the involuntary manslaughter of the students in Oxford High School shootings because they made the weapon accessible to their son while there was sufficient evidence to assume he would commit the murders. And all to kill whom? Who is dying in Palestine right now but children? They aren't Muslim, they aren't combatants, they are children. They are just brown children whose only so-called crime was to have been born in Palestine. Let's face it, this is a racial war being waged against children of color by Biden himself. He is a racist, has always been a racist, and his dehumanizing comments on the limited value he places on the lives of people of color exposes that. We know this. Oh, excuse me, this isn't a back and forth.
I don't care, but you're wrong.
We know this. We see you, Joe. We see right through your pandering to black and brown brothers and sisters while you sit there with your pale crime bills and genocides of more people of color across the world, including the actions that you are taking to perpetuate and exasperate the genocides in Africa and especially in the Congo. For these reasons, Biden should not only be banned from eating ice cream, he should be banned from the White House, he should be banned from running from office, and he should drop out. And he should also be banned from Detroit and from Michigan and barred and imprisoned like the war criminal that he and both Bibi are.
Good morning and salam, which is peace and blessings be upon you. This is a Muslim way of greeting. I stand before you today to demand that President Joe Biden drop out now, immediately, from the upcoming presidential elections. His remorseless actions and blatant massacre policies regarding the situation in Gaza are unambiguously genocidal. The relentless bombing and blockades have led to unimaginable suffering and loss of life. These actions have resulted in the destruction of homes, schools, hospitals, and creating a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions. Innocent lives have been lost. Families are torn apart, and a humanitarian disaster is unfolding before our eyes. This is the first time in history that we see a genocide live streamed to us. Kids being murdered, women being murdered, going through the medical procedures without anesthesia. Just imagine, we get a cut. Can you imagine yourself getting a suture without anesthesia? These women are giving birth to children via C-sections. That's 9 layers of tissue. For them to be born and bombarded and die? There is a severe shortage of basic necessities, including food, water, and medical supplies, due to continued blockades and military actions. That's a shame, and that's being done with our tax dollars. With our tax dollars. No, Mr. Biden, you cannot keep doing this. We will not allow you to keep aiding this massacre, this genocide. We will speak, and we will continue to speak until you drop out. As the leader of a nation that prides itself on human rights and democracy, President Biden has a moral responsibility to act in the interest of peace and justice. Instead, his administration's policies have exacerbated the suffering of the Palestinian people, undermining America's moral standing in the world. The whole world is asking to stop. But Mr. Biden, he is not listening to anybody because he is not capable of listening. He is not capable of leading this great nation. He needs to drop out now. We cannot, in good conscience, support a leader who perpetuates violence and human rights violation, the worst human rights violations in the history of this world. It is a time for accountability and for leadership that truly values human life and dignity. For the sake of the countless lives that are at risk and the lives that have been lost, and for the future of global peace, President Biden must step down. Let us come together to demand a change and to advocate for a more just and humane foreign policy. And we can only do that by asking the president, which is genocidal, which is a war criminal, to step down. We cannot allow him to run in this presidential race. Cease fire now. Free Palestine and drop out now. Mr. Biden, you are not welcome in Michigan. You were never welcome, and you will never be welcome in Michigan. So please stop coming to Michigan. Thank you.
My name is Ali Allam. I'm a student at the University of Michigan, where I serve as Vice President of our LSA student government. I'm here today in my personal capacity. We've been here for about an hour, and if you do the math, Israel has murdered at least 11 people in Gaza within that hour, 2 of whom are Palestinian mothers. And we see in the Lancet that just released a study showing that the actual death toll in a conservative estimate is at least 186,000 innocent men, women, and children who have been murdered at the hands of the illegal Zionist regime for no other crime than being born in Palestine. And this genocide has been aided and abetted by this US government. Billions of dollars worth of bombs, worth of ammunition have been sent to this illegal state, paid for by US taxpayers, and signed off personally by President Joe Biden. Now, the debate that happened a few weeks ago has made a lot of Democrats nervous. It's made them concerned about the mental state of this one man. Is he fit to run for office? But where was this concern when this one man inflicted trauma upon an entire population of 5 million Palestinians? Why is it that Biden's cognitive issues are making headlines now, but his support for the genocide in Gaza went almost unnoticed. And so a lot of people in this moment are questioning Biden's mental fitness to hold the highest office in the land. But we've been here and we've been questioning his moral fitness for months. That this is a man who has signed off on the genocide of a people, men, women, and children, who will no longer be able to look their parents in the eye, who will no longer be able to look their siblings in the eye, who are never going to see their family members in this life again. Aided and abetted by this president who proudly flaunts himself as a proud Zionist, somebody who proudly supports this illegal state. And for me, as a young person, I can tell you that young folks will not be getting behind this president. We will not be voting for somebody who has, instead of investing in education, in healthcare, in housing, right here, he has used our tax dollars to support geopolitical interests and to murder black and brown children overseas. And as a Muslim, I can tell you that the Muslim community and the Arab community will not be voting for a man who has sent the bombs that are going to slaughter our family members overseas. And let me be clear that when Biden drops out, whoever he's replaced with, we won't support them either unless they unequivocally stand with the Palestinian people and their right to return and the ending of funding to this illegal genocide, and they stand unequivocally for a ceasefire. Because whether it's Joe Biden or whether it's another slave to AIPAC, the money that is being sent is the same money. The bombs that are falling are the same bombs, and the lives that are being lost are still human lives. And so President Biden, you're here today visiting Michigan, trying to gain back your support. You felt like the debate sort of got you off your heels. And you're here today talking about Project 2025, this supposed stripping of democracy away from the American people. Where was President Biden's concern for democracy when the majority of Democratic voters and when the majority of voters in general have been supporting a ceasefire in Gaza for months? Where was President Biden's supposed support and love for democracy when the majority of voters have supported an end to unconditional aid to the state of Israel? The fact of the matter is that this president is a liar. This president is not somebody who values democracy, and he's not somebody who values human rights. And we will refuse to get behind him, and we demand that he leave the state and that he drop out of the election. Thank you.
My name is Khaled Kansu. I'm the Deputy Director of Abandoned Biden. Mr. President, we asked you many times for ceasefire, and you refused. And we vowed not to vote for you and to abandon you. Because you abandoned justice and you oppressed the Palestinian people. Now guess what, Mr. President? Most of the Americans are in sync with us. They are in agreement with us. So let me give you an advice from my heart. Do the right thing now. Do it before it's too late. As of now, you are not only oppressing the Palestinian people, you are oppressing the entire nation. You are oppressing all Americans, including yourself. So stop this madness. Stop this nonsense. Stop this oppression. And do it now. Drop out now. Drop out now for yourself. Save whatever is left of your dignity. And do it for yourself. If it's not for yourself, do it for Americans. Do it for the nation. And drop out now. Drop out now. Drop out now. And we ask all Americans to join us in urging the president and demanding him to drop out. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, Ryan Marshall with Channel 7. I know you say that you're abandoning Biden, you're not supporting him anymore, and there are calls for him to step down and have a replacement as a candidate. Is there somebody that you would say, if they were to come into play as the primary candidate, that you would talk to? I know there are several people on a short list, whether it's Kamala Harris or Governor Newsom or even Governor Whitmer is on that list. Is there anybody that you would be open to having dialogue and discussion?
At this point, we're open to speak to all the candidates, and we're encouraging all the candidates to speak to us. We want to hear what their position is on Palestine, because we will only support a candidate who's against this genocide, who believes that these atrocities should never have been committed, who will not continue to ship arms to occupied Palestine, and will begin the process of ending this occupation. And so we're open to hear from the candidates. We're very concerned about candidates who have supported the president in his expedition in Palestine. And we want to hear from them what their actual views are, because we would want to know exactly what direction they want to take and to what degree that they reject the position of the president.
There, with President Trump in office, there was a Muslim ban where people from certain countries, Muslim countries, could not come into the United States. President Trump has said that if I'm in office again, I will reinstate the Muslim ban. So you have people that are abandoning Biden, that are not voting for him. What do you say to the people that say, well, if you're not voting for him, it's a vote for Trump, a man who's going to then ban Muslims and maybe do other things?
Yeah, it's the repeated question, and one of the most extraordinary things for the American people to witness is that many, not only that, many folks in abandoned Biden were Democrats, progressives. They know fully well and are completely clear-eyed to the potential consequence of bringing in the Republican candidate. The reality is that each and every one of us, right behind me, is willing to take this risk, is willing to sacrifice. As we said in Abandoned Biden since October, 4 years under any Republican is incomparable to 1 day in Gaza. And so we sacrifice for human rights and civil rights. The man who wrote in a Birmingham jail with dogs biting into their flesh. We survived 4 years of that despicable president. But Palestinians will never survive another 4 years under Biden or any candidate that continues these policies of destruction and genocide. And so we are committed to continuing to ask the president to drop out because he stands for genocide. But he's no different than any. That the quest is universal. It's about human rights. It's about civil rights. That any candidate who supports these policies will never support them because they abandon the value of life. They abandon the freedom of a people. And therefore we must abandon them.
There's a lot of in the Muslim and Arabic community, Lebanese, Yemenis, Iraqi, Palestinian people. There are a lot of people that are represented in the community. So I hear there's anger in the community. Is there hate? I heard that you lost a lot of family members sometimes when you have those close people to you that you've lost, that can sow hate. Is there hate in this community for President Biden?
I would say that the way in which people are experiencing their emotions is one of resolve. That they've looked at this situation and trembling, they would ask in October and November, but what happens when we don't vote for Biden? What happens when we vote for a third party candidate? And they study the situation very closely. Our leaders have been looking at and thinking about this for some time. And you come up with a decision, in many cases really challenging moral questions, and you look at it, and what most people have been saying is it's a no-brainer when you think of it. That we have to punish this president because this country would suffer in the depths of immorality. The consequence of him being rewarded for killing our family members and murdering our friends and colleagues. That it would set a precedent that a president could engage in these policies and then return back at the highest seat, at the top of a superpower, and continue his policies unvetted, unquestioned, incontrovertibly. The only path is to ensure that he's toppled. And that he's toppled because of the genocide. And that it's known in history that a man so powerful came down because of this policy of death and destruction in a nation miles and miles, thousands of miles away. Sister Summer?
Hi, Cameron. I guess in response to the first question, with respect to, I believe you were asking the alternative. I'll say this, that elections have consequences, but so do your actions. And for many of us in the community, this election is a referendum on genocide. It's not about the alternative. It's about holding a politician accountable for his actions, specifically that of the genocide, right? We want to ensure that if somebody commits the ultimate and the gravest sin and crime against humanity, that they are never rewarded with a second term. So insofar as that there would be a Muslim ban, or that we would lose abortion rights, or that healthcare would go up, all of those things are extremely important to me personally as a progressive. However, I value human life enough to say that it is more important than domestic policy. And so the alternative is really not the question. The question is, are we going to hold somebody accountable for genocide or not? That's the first answer I have for that. On the second one, I think there are a lot of people with different moral beliefs. Is there hate? I'll tell you, there's definitely hate because I feel it. I've never hated a president. I've never, hated people in general. I think hate is a really, really negative word. Never use it. However, I hate Joe Biden. I really hate him. And I wouldn't so much as talk to him because he's not worth the spit. He's somebody that I do believe is a war criminal and deserves to rot in the worst of prisons. So yes, there is hate, at least from one person.
Thanks for sharing your perspective. Do you have any family members that are close to you that have suffered in the conflict?
I am of Yemeni origin. My children are of Palestinian descent, and my in-laws are all Palestinian Christians. So there are definitely people in Palestine that are impacted from my ex's family.
Are there any third-party candidates or somebody outside the Democratic Party that you might look to for the upcoming presidential election that you may consider supporting?
For me, I will support anybody except Biden. So it could be an independent, it could be a third party, it could be another Democrat, it could be Trump. I could care less. I will support anybody so long as it ensures the loss of Joe Biden and that we hold him accountable for his actions.
To that end, one of the people on the short list is Governor Whitmer. The Muslim community and a lot of the faith leaders here condemned Governor Whitmer for her lack of response and her lack of communication with this community. So anybody, including Governor Whitmer, would you say you would listen to Governor Whitmer even if it wasn't Joe Biden?
So on behalf of the campaign, we have an endorsement process, and all the candidates will have to talk to our endorsement committee and go through their process. Would I personally, I don't support Whitmer, but that's just my personal belief. The Bannon Biden campaign has a rigorous process of endorsements and interviewing candidates before they are going to decide who they back.
And just a quick follow-up with Kamala Harris. Some in the Muslim community, Arabic community, feel she's just an extension of the current regime, Biden. So I know you said anybody but Biden, but those two examples, how do you feel about that?
Well, if Kamala Harris was to come back tomorrow and say there would be a one-state solution with every man has equal rights for all, that she would ensure that Bibi is held accountable, that she would call for a ceasefire, rebuild Gaza, ensure the right of return to Palestinians, I might get behind that. But the likelihood of her doing something like that is very slim, as we are all well aware. But again, it is not a decision for one person. This is a campaign of Muslims and Jews and white people and Mexicans and black people who are a diverse community. And even within the Muslim community, as you rightly pointed out in Dearborn, we're not a monolith. There are people who are Republican, who are independent, who are Democratic, etc. And so, we're looking for guidance and we're looking to lean on each other to see what would be the best route for the entire nation to go on.
About the vice president, we feel that she's been very much attached to the policy of the president. But if she came to us and said, but if the vice president has been very attached to the policy of this president, the vice president has been very attached to the policy of this president. But if she came to us and said, in my heart, I've always known that this was genocide, and that I've had to be in lockstep with our president because I'm the vice president, and I stand against genocide, and I want to end arms shipments to Gaza, to the state of Israel, and I'm going to support the end of this occupation, then we're talking. And so we don't want to say anything about any particular candidate, but we feel there should be something akin to a primary in which we get an opportunity to speak to each of these candidates, and that we can begin the process of healing our country and changing our foreign policy. And so we fundamentally believe that any person who stands for justice, we would be behind them. And that in spirit, they're actually behind us right here.
Have there been any recent attempts at outreach from either the Biden campaign or the Democratic Party, anybody affiliated with somebody at the president's inner circle, anything of that nature?
At this point, with Bannon Biden in particular, no, there hasn't been outreach. In the beginning, there were moments in which the White House was asking us to stop our movement, to stop our conferences, because they feared the consequence, the loss of the election. But now the communication line is extremely limited. Do we have folks that wish that the future of this party can shift? We do, and so we know that the president is just one man in the party, that there's talent up and down and right throughout. And so we're hoping that people can come out of the woodwork, that they'll stop, and the fear of conformity will not motivate them, but that the pursuit of justice and transforming their nation, because this is one of those moments where we could turn the page and the next president can make cataclysmic change. And so we are excited about the potential, but there's very little time. And so we want to open that link. We want to hear from the candidates. We want to speak to them, and we want to let them know that we're here to listen about what their views are and how they can rebuild this party towards good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to your word hate, I would say it's rather.
Microphone. Or you want to do it afterwards, or? Yeah. Okay. So we can. Thank you.
Not at all.
Thank you very much.
What's his